what are you, often when people talk about development, they're talking about industrial development. And I've heard some from the South talk about more industry and so on. But so what sort of development do you really want? And they're always talking about sort of transitions from the north to the south, but it's not necessarily the best thing to have the sort of technology that the north is wanting to impose on the south. I mean, what do you really mean? What sort of development do you really?
I'm talking about sustainable development.
Sustainable development.
Yes. But in order to have alternatives to, for example, a thermoelectric plant that uses carbon, coal.
Yes.
You have to have access to the alternative that is cleaner, and that doesn't necessarily happen with all the countries. I mean, if you're asking, I don't know, a population in Ecuador to not have access to electricity in the name of climate, they have urgent needs that they have to attend. So if you are saying that, then give them solar panels so that they can have access to that technology, and maybe financial support to that, to have access to that alternative technology that is clean or climate friendly.
Now
then they can have electricity. But if some developing countries don't have options to supply for the basic needs of people, then you have a struggle between intragenerational equity and intergenerational equity. So it is complicated, but we have to consider that it should all be integral. We can't talk about a long-term goal, global goal, without defining first what the people that are historically responsible for the problem are going to do.
Well, there are many solutions that are being proposed. Nuclear energy, biofuels, and there's always a lot of money to promote nuclear energy and biofuels. What position would you be taking? I mean, would you consider biofuels to be sustainable? Thinking of Paraguay, which is sometimes called the kingdom of soy.
No, in terms of biofuels, you can't generalize. I do think that there could be some biofuel production that can be certified or could comply with some standards. But in general, I do think that you should always guarantee environmental integrity of the mitigation measures, such as biofuels, but also, nuclear power and CCS is the other one. No? For us, carbon capture and storage, we don't want to include it. That's one of our positions, and we don't want it to be included in the clean development mechanism because it has high risks, and also it implies that all the externalities and all the potential leakage that could happen would be suffered by developing countries through the CDM, right? Another issue with carbon capture and storage is also the fact that it could be that even when the projects are implemented in developing countries, it could be done by multinational companies that could be getting the benefits. We shouldn't forget that the clean development mechanism, for example, has two goals. The second goal is contributing to sustainable development in developing countries. And sometimes we forget about that. And going back to your first question, I do think that humanity sometimes has the ability only to focus on one problem. And now it's climate change, and it's not even climate change, it's mitigation and reducing emissions from energy. But we shouldn't forget that maybe some solutions for that could be environmentally or socially negative, could have negative impacts. So I believe that we should always have a holistic view, and we should always consider the implications, positive and negative, of all the measures that we're taking. In this case, it could be mitigation. So biofuels, for example, we have seen the social and environmental impacts they can have. It depends on how you develop the biofuels. And well, with nuclear energy, we don't. Ecuador, I'm not talking about Ecuador. We haven't defined a position on that, but
You haven't defined a position on nuclear?
Not-
Where I know there's nuclear energy in Argentina and Brazil.
No, we don't have nuclear energy, and we're not
No.
developing it.
But in Argentina
at
and
all.
Brazil they do, but they're not part of the ALBA.
No.
And do any of the members of the ALBA states have nuclear?
To be honest, I don't know. Maybe it's one of the things that we haven't discussed because we have assumed for now that it's not going to happen. And we, at least in terms of climate change and energy and everything, we have been concerned about all the different issues that you know that there's a lot.
So are you thinking more of solar energy as being one of the principal solutions?
Yes, and also for my country, especially geothermal energy.
Geothermal?
Yes, we have a lot of geothermal potential, and also wind, eolic energy. Right now, I would say that mitigation and energy could be just the international North agenda. For example, in my country, 80% of the emissions come from deforestation and land use change. 80% approximately. So if we
With
need
multinational companies or?
everything, it's land use change in general.
Right. But deforestation, is that true?
We have a lot of different problems. And with Ecuador, one of the main causes of deforestation is oil activity, unlike some other countries. So that's why we also have other innovative proposals like the Yasuni ITT proposal. I don't know if you have heard about that.
No.
But Ecuador is an oil producing country. 55% of our revenues come from oil.
Mm-hmm.
So what we are proposing is to leave the oil on the ground in exchange of global compensation, international compensation for that, because we depend on oil. We're willing to combat climate change, and also our largest oil reserves are located in a national park that is the most biodiverse park in the world per hectare. It's the most biodiverse park in the world per unit of area. And there's also it's also the place where two isolated indigenous peoples communities, indigenous peoples in voluntary isolation, live. So we want to save them, but it's again like economics and how we depend on oil. Even our social revenues come from oil, and saving biodiversity and leaving the oil on the ground. So what my president, Rafael Correa, is asking is for international help to do that. So Ecuador right now is willing to not exploit that oil in exchange of at least half of the revenues that we would have earned during the 13 years. And it's an alternative proposal to what we see here. And it's also a real solution because we are an oil-producing country, but we are willing to leave that on the ground. Not only, especially because of the biodiversity that we have there, and also of our cultural richness. And so for us, this is the only way to preserve that. And it's also a really interesting proposal because what we want is for those funds to go to a trust fund that would only be used to invest in projects that are related to biodiversity conservation, reduction of deforestation, the renewable energy projects, and social development. So it's all in line with our priorities.